Welcome to the Giving Back is Dead podcast brought to you by Scott Stover. Giving Back is Dead is a progressive, open forum for discussing next-gen giving to the arts and sustainable practices for nonprofits. For more information on Scott, myself, and our advisory services, please visit scottstoverinc.com. Good morning. Welcome to the podcast Giving Back is Dead. This morning we're talking to Dr. Brigitte Nicole Grice. Giving Back is Dead is about the future of philanthropy. We're looking at how the next generation will continue to support philanthropy. We're here for the third year at OFFSCREEN Paris, and I want to thank my friend Julian Friedman, who's doing this incredible job, and I encourage everybody to come see OFFSCREEN if they haven't seen it yet. So we're speaking to Dr. Grice because she's doing an incredibly interesting project, which is, well, Brigitte, why don't you explain your project?
Our project is called Chez Max and Dorothea, and the reason it has this name Chez Max and Dorothea because we're actually working to preserve the final home and studios of Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning. Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning moved to the south of France in the early 60s, and from there they were actually drawn there from this writer Patrick Wahlberg, who was friends. He actually did one of the early monographs of Max Ernst, and they would visit, and then they decided to move there. So we are working to preserve the home, but not to just keep it kind of a historical home, but actually to bring it into the future. So Chez Max and Dorothea is a registered 501c3 nonprofit based in the United States. We have a Los Angeles headquarters in a historic property in MacArthur Park, close to downtown Los Angeles. And we operate out of 8,000 square feet. So there we have exhibitions since January, which you came to our first exhibition titled Whisper Their Sinful Names, which is actually taken from a Max Ernst poem. It was a new set of poems that Max Ernst did in the 40s to go alongside a survey exhibition he had at William Copley's galleries in Beverly Hills. And Los Angeles is significant to Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning because it is actually the place where they were married. They were married in Beverly Hills alongside Man Ray and Juliet Browner, now considered Juliet Man Ray. So they had a double wedding, which is a really fun fact that not everyone knows. And Los Angeles is kind of an interesting bridge to Seillans because in the south of France, it's kind of this really serene, small village countryside. And Max and Dorothea were really known for, once they left New York in the 40s after they met, one, to probably get away from Peggy Guggenheim, and two, they really always loved being in more remote places. So then they lived in Sedona, Arizona, and they kind of had this idea of almost refuge, and being in kind of encased in landscape was very important to them. And in Sedona, actually, that was the first home they built in the 40s. That was largely Max building a home. That was a very simple home. It was a one bedroom, and then they extended it, and then Max built a big studio. And later then, the home that we are working on is actually kind of the grand home of Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning. And it is a home that had these two giant two-floor studios, giant, almost like warehouse-like north-facing windows, and the whole floor is travertine marble. Max Ernst designed this remarkable keyhole-shaped pool that also doubles as a champagne cork, which is honestly the best swim in my life, which I hope many others will enjoy as well. And Max also had this, because of his experience and being interned multiple times during World War II, he actually had this kind of trauma set into him, and in the cellar of the house where they stored some very important artworks for long periods of time was actually an escape chute. So Max designed this escape chute just in case anything like World War II ever happened again. So there's actually, that goes down to these terraces that we're hoping to soon activate once again as a sculpture garden.
So, as you know, Brigitte, the reason why I wanted to have you on Giving Back is Dead is that I think a lot of the elements of your project are elements which are typical of the kind of nonprofit which next gens want to support. So tell us a little more about what you actually intend to do in the future about these residencies and how that will fit between Seillans and Los Angeles.
So We have kind of a three-pillar vision. One is really a world-class research center. My doctorate is in international surrealism. I really care about research. I'm also a practicing artist. I don't think all practicing artists have to be researchers, but I don't mind the crossover. I think it's actually very interesting to have. I think contemporary art for the past 15 years, we could say, is really drawn from surrealism, and I think it's important to have more of a depth and richness to that understanding of surrealism. So it's not just, surrealism was never a style. I think that's a very important thing to...
Never a style.
Never a style. It's a very important thing to clarify, and it's kind of a very termed idea that surrealism was one style, but actually the almost genius of surrealism was its multiplicity.
Which is what we see currently in the Centre Pompidou exhibition.
Exactly.
As we see the multitude of styles, and it even goes the multitude of periods of surrealism.
Yeah, so there never really was one style. It was really kind of a philosophy, a state of mind, and an experience that wasn't really only about the final works. So we're trying to bring that idea back to this house to kind of have education and experience and also practice. So like we want people to work again in these studios. So they're not these flat-ended places, but they're actually alive and living. And so people can kind of have this idyllic place to work, surrounded by mountains all around them, like idyllic nature landscape. And then Los Angeles kind of doubles as more of this kind of art center, right? As we know, Los Angeles has, in the past 20 years, has grown exponentially. And so I think it's kind of important to have that kind of connection between Europe and America that can really extend more of a global network. So there's the research center, there's the exhibition spaces that will be both in Los Angeles. Right now we have a really excellent show called Daniela Gawa and Benjamin Serrano, which is sponsored by the Mexican consulate. And it's a survey show of two artists who both have passed now, but have lived in Mexico for most of their lives in Tijuana. One was French and one was Mexican. They met in Paris in the mid-1960s. So we're really trying to bridge these kind of like more historical exhibitions with contemporary artists. Some are more historical exhibitions solely, like the one we currently have in Los Angeles, and some are more of a bridge. So our second exhibition was called The Return of Histoire Naturelle. Histoire Naturelle was one of the early frottage series that Max Ernst did. And so we showed that in a different way than most people usually show it. We showed it some in vitrines and some framed alongside 13 other contemporary artists to give it one, breathing room, and two, just kind of a new context to really see how many younger artists are drawing upon and have kind of built upon these ideas of Max Ernst. Max Ernst was one of the most prolific artists of the 20th century, and I feel like there's still so much for younger generations to discover and learn from him and Dorothea. Both of them had these kind of very wide disciplines and practices that crossed over from poetry to painting to sculpture to film to making costumes and scenography. So I think there's kind of this really interesting moment and crossover between their two disciplines and how much kind of contemporary art is already almost mimicking that and how plural contemporary art is. It's kind of the post-discipline time.
So tell us a little bit about how the residencies, so the residencies are going to be for artists, scholars, research, writers, and I think about what else? It's going to be a series of different kinds. So it's not just for artists.
It's not just for artists, this is true. I think something's important because it is kind of this historical house and it does have this strong history around surrealism. We really want to open it up also to scholars. That includes scholars that are academics, that includes poets, that includes curators.
Could be musicians.
Musicians, definitely.
Performance artists,
Performance artists is definitely open. Max and Dorothea both were very avidly interested in new music coming out. Some of Dorothea's work was actually very inspired by music. So definitely musicians, and it's actually an amazing place to play music. There's actually quite a interesting history, a more current history of British music producers who are living. My friend Andrew, who's a big British music producer, actually lives in the village now. And he produced everything from like John Lee Hooker to the Pogues to Stone Roses. So it's kind of interesting how these kind of strange crossovers all meet in the south of France.
And how will you choose the residents?
We'll have a council, so we'll have a committee, and that will probably change on an annual basis. So we'll have a committee, we'll have open applications, and then I think we'll also have appointed. So we'll have selections as well.
And I also understand you have a board of advisors for the whole project, which includes eminent scholars on surrealism and contemporary art. Why don't you talk a little bit about who these people are?
One of our board of advisors is Donna Des, who was my supervisor for my PhD, and I'm very close to, and I'm actually going to see her next week because she's curating a very important show at the Sei Zero in Venice of Roberto Matta's retrospective. Dawn's really fascinating, one, because she's probably the top scholar of surrealism still today and has curated some of the most important shows to recontextualize Dada and surrealism in our kind of more contemporary times. She did a show, Dada and Surrealism Reviewed, in 1978 at the Hayward Gallery. And she's done more contemporary shows that have been like Dali and Duchamp at the RA, and then this new Matta show is going to be really big. So, but a really interesting fact, she is one of the premier scholars on Salvador Dali. And in the mid-60s, when she was going to visit Salvador Dali in Cadix in Spain, she actually stopped in Seillans to visit Dorothea in the house. Max was a little under the weather. She didn't see Max that time. But she met with Dorothea, and it was when the house was under construction. So it's kind of this kind of funny thing.
And it's not really on the way to Cadix.
No, she just decided to stop by. Dawn was, one of those early scholars that was young at the time, and she was going around and meeting everyone. So.
And Dawn does feel that transforming the property in this way is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Dawn does definitely feel this is
Because
important.
if I understand correctly, there's not much art that is left in the house. Is that correct?
No, there's not much art. So Dorothea sold the house in 1980. Max passed away in 76, and with that she stayed on for a little bit longer. But I think the memory of a house that they built together, they designed, I think that memory is probably really hard. They were together for almost 30 years. And
how many years of that was in this house?
6.
6.
Yeah. So it's kind of a hard thing, I think, that they were building this house for them, and Max passed on, and I think she decided to move. She did decide to go back to New York to kind of restart her life independently. And there isn't, I think the work that's in the house is the house, quite frankly. The house is probably one of the most important works of art of both of them. It really shows, it's modeled after Venetian architecture. So there's these two kind of campaniles on both sides, and one is their giant studios. And a campanile really was kind of a signifier of stature. And so you can really sense that this house was their signifying house, that they've done it, they've made it finally. They struggled for a very long time in their lives. And I kind of find that experience that they both encountered in their lives, from one, Max experiencing the horrors of World War II and World War I. He fought in World War I. But also being interned multiple times, his life being very much at risk, and then them struggling to just get by. When they lived in Sedona, they would sell or trade their artwork to get groceries sometimes. And when they lived in Sedona, Arizona, they didn't, I think they were famous, but that doesn't mean, I think there's always a misconception that some people, even though they're doing really well on an outward level, sometimes artists, and this is what I really care about, I think artists need support. Artists need a lot more support, and I think what's really interesting is the patronage that was around historically in surrealism is a very interesting example. So for instance, there would be some artists in the group that were very well off, and they knew that they were then supporting the ones that were struggling. So there's all these instances where there was kind of this mutual support system in a way.
Which is what you're trying to recreate.
Yeah, we're trying to create that sense and not having, and I think this is why we're a nonprofit, one for kind of the posterity of it, one to kind of have a really lasting vision that can help and establish itself and doesn't have to focus on selling an artwork just to get by. Like Breton, even though he was probably the most incredible collector, usually later on in life, if he wanted to buy a piece, he had to sell a piece. We don't want to, yeah. For someone that at that stature is just, it's remarkable. And it's just, how do we keep something that has a longevity, a consistency, but can be generous and help others? And there's a beam. So there's an old beam that Max found that used to be on, they'd be considered like holy doors at a convent or a monastery. And it's a Latin phrase that you would put over your door, and this he found as an engraving that's under the central door, and it's Par petit sed magis cor, and it translates to the door opens, but the heart opens even more. So essentially the idea
So wonderful.
is when you walk through what's usually a wide door, which it is, your heart will open even wider.
Beautiful.
And
So beautiful.
that kind of like heart mission is really something that I personally care about and drive, and just to see that that was reflected in the details of the architecture is such a stunning thing that we want to kind of convey to others.
So I have a couple of questions. First of all, could you be a little clearer as to how you see the house in the south of France functioning, the residency programs functioning in relation to Los Angeles? Mm-hmm. What is the relevancy really of, how will it practically function? Mm-hmm. Will it be the same residence in both places? Is Los Angeles going to be more the exhibition place? What do you think?
Los Angeles right now is more exhibition place, but we're hoping by I think the spring, we can have it more as a residency. So we have a 8,000 square foot building, 2 floors. Downstairs we want to be more studios, and upstairs is more exhibition space where we have a library.
Having known the space, it's perfect for that.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect space. Yeah. And there's also these kind of objective hazard or coincidences that were perfect in the sense that the keyhole pool in Seillans, so in our building, our 1922 building in Los Angeles, so it's a Spanish colonial revival building. It's probably the most preserved example of that in Los Angeles as a commercial building. And one of the windows, and it's overlooking this historic lake. And there's one of the historic Spanish windows, these gorgeous windows, that one actually has a keyhole, one of the original keyhole. No, I have to like show people because it's a small detail, it's the original keyhole that looks out on the lake. So the keyhole, when you look through it, is, water. So it's kind of this very funny thing. But so Los Angeles will more operate right now as the exhibition spaces, and there will be different residents. I don't think the same residents will go back and forth. I think it will change.
And do you see showing work from the residents in Seillans will be shown in Los Angeles, or how do you think that will work?
I think at times perhaps that will happen, but I don't think it's going to be such a crossover. I think the shows in Los Angeles, I think, will be more curated shows, which doesn't mean that the residents that are working in Seillans could be showing in Los Angeles, but I just see those as a more kind of like curated show. It's not just showing work that's in process or just finished. It could be, depending what is the show being curated, but it's not a necessity.
So let's talk a little more about you. What I would like to know is, why did you decide to do a nonprofit? Mm-hmm. So I know that formerly you did work at a commercial gallery coming out of school, so you have an experience at a commercial gallery, and I think you would have been great working at a great commercial gallery and being able to earn a lot of money. And you chose not to do that, mm-hmm. and to devote your time to putting together this nonprofit where clearly it's not about you earning money. Mm-hmm. So what was the process? Why did you decide to do that?
I think there's more important passions to me besides the profit of this project. I like this is really a project of the heart, and it's a project of a movement that I've devoted about almost 12 years now to studying and working on. It's something that I don't mean, it's not that I don't want it to profit, I want it to be sustainable, I want it to have longevity, but it's not something that I ever cared about making a penny off of. Yeah. It was more something to extend a generosity and a dialogue to others. It was never about a paycheck. It was never it was always kind of to keep the vision and the mission alive, beyond something that would just be, oh, we needed to sell work. And my background is also an academic. I have a master's degree from Cal Arts, where I worked in aesthetics and politics and philosophy. And then I did my doctorate on international surrealism. And from that, and also before that, I did work in a commercial gallery. I've also worked in museums, and I've worked in foundations, and I've I used to run the bookstore at Hauserworth when it started in Los Angeles for a long time. So I kind of have run the gamut of all these different positions in the art world, but also...
So why decide now to devote a big chunk of your life to do this, to do a nonprofit? Why did you decide that's the direction that you wanted to go?
Los Angeles has become quickly a lot more of a commercial city. Yeah. And I think that has a little bit of a problematic element to it, in the sense that one of the most interesting things about Los Angeles is the community and the discourse.
Which feels very different to me than the community that I see certainly in New York and in Paris, which are the places that I frequent. Mm-hmm. And it seems like there's a very strong artist community in Los Angeles that I don't see as much in the other cities. That's the case, isn't it?
There really is. And I think that comes from maybe our education system.
Yeah, because you have those great
schools,
art schools that are there.
And that really emphasize discourse and critique and conversation and dialogue. But lately, a lot of these kind of institutional, important kind of nonprofit structures have been kind of falling away. And so I think it's really important to kind of push that back up again, to have that dialogue and to remind ourselves that art isn't just here for a commercial sale. A commercial sale is helpful. I support all commercial galleries and enterprises. However, I think it's important to recognize that that's not really the crux of what art is doing, and to try to kind of expand a little bit of a different dialogue, that conversation doesn't have to be at the forefront. And we can have a lot more different conversations, a lot more depth, a lot more dialogue, to go a little bit deeper outside of
just the commercial
side, which sometimes, because they're focused on that, there's other things that get left behind, and we really want to go deep. And we want to go deep, and we want to go into research, and we want to really expand this understanding and conversation that isn't too easy or quick.
Of course, that's what I'm looking for as well. That I feel there's been an overemphasis on the commercial side, and people are less focusing on what the art really is about. It all becomes commercial, which is the whole point of what I do as well. So can you tell me a little bit about what you see as different trends in terms of giving to the arts from let's say, the baby boomer generation to the younger generation? Do you have thoughts about how that's... Please, go ahead and tell me.
There's a different way that I think the boomer generation has been thinking about philanthropy, in the sense that it really is more kind of writing your check and giving it to the museum, and then being in, having your name on the wall, and this kind of thing that I think is changing a bit, in the sense that I think the younger generations, I think they should be doing that too. I really do think they should be doing that too. I think they should be.
I've had younger people on the podcast who are very clear. They say that they do not want to support the large institutions, but they will, if they do, they want to support specific activities of these institutions, such as focusing on underrepresented communities.
I think Okay, yes, of course that too. But I also think that younger generations, if they can, they should also be supporting these museums, these institutions, the smaller nonprofits that people think don't need, they could need just like a $5,000 check. Yeah. And that could be like so exponentially changing something that that some people just don't realize.
But you know, in the philanthropy today, in the arts, it seems to me that it's much easier to get support for huge projects than it is for smaller projects. It's much easier to get the big check than the small check, which of course is just a reflection of the inequality of our society.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think going back to this kind of thing of like why younger generations should also be supporting institutions and museums. It doesn't have to only be large scale, but I think what's important about that is I'm always kind of wary of like, I think the individual basis is helpful and also almost provides like a check of power on when we have just brands supporting museums and institutions, because then I'm like, is this a da-da-da show or is this actually the artist's show? And also I think that also becomes complicated when galleries actually are supporting exhibitions at the same time.
And you think the younger generation is conscious of all this? Because it seems to me to be
I'm not sure if they are. I hope so.
To me it seems that they're excited about the luxury industry which is coming in and supporting. And to me, I'm sort of bothered by seeing this confusion.
Yeah, you know, I think it depends on the generation, and maybe, yeah, I'm a little bit more of I work on surrealism, a little more skeptical of our consumer culture and a way that consumerism, I think you can take maybe a step back and examine it, and I don't want our uber consumer culture to be conflated into the criticality and the strength of art. I think I look at someone like Herbert Marcuse, who really talked about the power of art even when it was in these understandings of, we could say, co-opted situations, that the art still could transcend and have an impact. So I think about that, but I am a little bit wary of when we have big brands or luxury only supporting these institutions, and I think individuals still need to have kind of a role in it.
Corporate sponsoring has fallen off significantly. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's not maybe, looking at the data, it seems that shouldn't be as much of an issue as it is. So you say the boomers are really supporting big institutions, names on the wall, and amounts. You say the younger generation should be doing a little bit of that as well. What else do you think they like to do?
Yeah, I think the younger generation also wants to be involved. I don't think everyone of the younger generation wants to be involved, but I think they want to be involved and they want change.
What kind of change?
I think everyone right now wants change. They want a sustainable world. They want a sustainable way of life. And they want community. And I think this is kind of like these things that we are dwindled from just our normal day-to-day can be really taken away from because of just simple things like social media and things that kind of, not to say they're tools, but we need interpersonal relations as well. And I think people really do know that, you know, we care, we want the environment to live, right? And I think art actually plays the most critical role in this because art gives us hope, it gives us sanity, and it kind of is our floating device to really think anew in this really polluted and damaged world at the moment. And I think everyone has a huge role to play, whether it's just recycling, you know, every day or whatever they can do. But I think that the younger generation is aware of this. And I think even the younger generation below me, you know, is really aware of it. And I think something kind of controversial right now, obviously, is the Stop Oil protest, right? And that the National Gallery just yesterday announced that they had to have this heightened security, right, in the galleries. And I think this is
Now, what do you think about that? What do you think about that and its impact, and should it be happening?
I understand what they're doing, stop oil. And I think their sentencing is absurd and horrible. I really don't stand by that sentencing. I don't think that they should have jail time. I don't agree also at the same time in terms of the actions in the museums, but I do get why they're doing it. You know, they are trying to bring a type of emergency and urgency to a situation that is urgent. And they're trying to bring an awareness of a situation and the complicity within the art world. Whether Van Gogh really would, be part of it or not. I think Nadia from Pussy Riot actually wrote a really nice letter.
I didn't see it. What did she?
She wrote a letter kind of from a perspective of Van Gogh today. So kind of like how he would be in support of the Stop Oil protesters, and because she was imprisoned for, I think, 4 years in Russia for her political actions. And I think it's interesting that we shouldn't just agree that that should be their sentence. They're really young, and they did something that was very brave and courageous. And I think we should more think about why they're doing it versus and then just having these repercussions to them.
Well, don't you think, I think personally, that because of Nan Goldin's interventions, that we are looking at the origin of our donors' wealth, and I think that has been an important change, and I think that and important and positive, and I think the fact that we're looking at how these great institutions, endowments, are invested is also relevant. I mean, I think all that is relevant. I see that as being rather positive. Yeah, you do as well.
I agree.
And you think that is important to the younger generation. If you want to support a project or an institution, they do want some ethics in terms of either where the funds coming from and wherever the funds are invested.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to say to us today? About the project or the topic or the future of supporting the arts by the next generation?
Surrealism has such a strong message still for our youth and for our times. So I think that's also such an important element, is really connecting that message that Surrealism brought 100 years ago and still continues to illuminate today into how that can correlate to contemporary art and our kind of more contemporary philosophy and movements of now. So
that's beautiful. That makes me think in closing that we have at the moment this extraordinary exhibition at Centre Pompidou, Surrealism, and it's gigantic. And as you know, I had the privilege of spending several hours with you in the exhibition. So how relevant do you think it is having that kind of exhibition, particularly for the younger generation?
Oh, I think it's so important. I think it's important. I hope that everyone can see it, especially if you're in Paris, because after January, you might not be able to enter the Pompidou for what, 4 years, 3 years, 5 years. 5 years. So I think it's actually
ending on Surrealism.
It's ending on Surrealism, and hopefully, I think it's important for people to see the range and to see the topics. I think Didier did a really wonderful job in terms of having an exhibition that was really alive. He was really against doing something that was only historical and passé. He really wanted to bring these different rooms and themes of the movement, which there are many, into conversation. And I think it provides a lot of context. I think there still is. I think people should also get the catalog, even though it's big. I think that also provides a little deeper understanding of some of these ideas further.
Well, Brigitte, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure.
Be sure to check out our latest podcast and subscribe to Giving Back is Dead.